I think with all the hype around Apple Intelligence, we have really missed the point of WWDC 2025 and what Apple is trying to achieve right now. And that is that Apple wants to become the operating system for your life. Now, what I mean by that is that Apple wants to be the default choice that you turn to for basically any sort of consumer technology device or interaction. That could be a phone, that could be a laptop, that could be your tablet, and it could be something that is just sort of ambient in your room, like the Vision OS experience. This is an idea that's kind of come and go in consumer tech in various times from various angles. When I say ambient, I am referencing ambient computing, which was something that Microsoft was kind of talking about a little bit in the last decade when they made their mixed reality push. The idea with them at that time was that maybe people would start to use these Windows mixed reality devices and have this sort of ambient experience where, much like Vision OS is envisioned today, you would kind of walk around and you would be fully immersed in that case, the Microsoft experience. But Apple wants to do the same thing, and they have their own angle on it. And with the latest releases coming out of WWDC 2025, with the updated operating systems and the unified liquid glass design, I think they've more or less got there. Even though they're not literally having one operating system for your entire life, they have gotten to a point where they have a set of operating systems that work together in a unified way that can effectively cover everyone's consumer tech needs from their phone to a full size computer doing professional, high end developer creative workflows. Let's go through like what has happened up to this point. I think Apple really began this journey in 2014 with iOS 8 in OS X Yosemite, where we had handoff and continuity be introduced. That was the ability to see that someone was calling you on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Mac, and you could interact with that on those devices. It was pretty limited in the start. But over time, Apple added more and more features like this. But in any case, this continuity feature really was, I think, the first really strong indication that this was the direction Apple wanted to go. And then there was a variety of continuity features added through the years after that. But then in 2020, we had the next big thing, and that was macOS Big Sur and Apple Silicon, or maybe probably more fair to say Apple Silicon and macOS Big Sur. The Apple Silicon component was important because Apple needed this to create a hardware, an actual architecture, as in a chip architecture, that they could put in a wide variety of their devices, and that would be allow them to unify their development ecosystem, which they have done, so that you could have a code base running on all their devices without any issues. And Apple's been successful in that. Of course, Apple Silicon's been extremely popular. Then macOS Big Sur, when we look at this old screenshot from 2020 of that design, you start to see the unification of some of the features that were more popular on the iPhone and the iPad being better integrated into macOS. There were updates to messages, Apple Maps, the notification center, so on and so forth. And at that time, Big Sur started to look more like an iPhone operating system, but was still distinctly, Mac-like. And there were still lots and lots and lots of edge cases where the transition wasn't super smooth. But now, in 2025, we get liquid glass. And now we have this screenshot here where we see Apple's offerings on a variety of screens, from a television down to a smartwatch, with the laptop macOS, iPad OS, and iOS in between. And now it's, I think people may be getting a little caught up or confused about liquid glass being a unified design and that being the big thing. And it is, in one sense. But I think the other big thing is that they are now 1 year away from dropping. They've announced that next year, no more Intel Macs will be supported. And at that point, we're going to be in a situation where Apple is only releasing operating systems for its own silicon. And that means that we're going to be able to have a fully unified development ecosystem across all these devices without any translation layers or oddities in that regard. And with Liquid Glass now being available, or soon to be available, it's also going to give developers a unified design language so that they can design once and kind of have a more or less a similar experience across all of the devices. And that puts Apple in a really unique position because they're going to have, like I said, basically an operating system for your life. Everything that you do in consumer tech, that you might be from your television all the way down to your smartwatch and all of the screens in between, Apple will have an answer for you. And they will have an answer for you that shares data across all those devices, that shares a design experience across all devices, where you can buy an app once through Apple's App Store and have it available on all those devices. And I think it's really impressive. Like, it's quite, and I'm surprised that people seem to have kind of missed this. Everyone's talking about Apple Intelligence, whether they did good or not on that. That's fairly irrelevant compared to what they have accomplished here, because this is something that's entirely unique to Apple. This is something that no one is remotely in a position to respond to them on, because Apple's been working on this for 10 years. I think this was the plan all along. I remember that when we got this announcement back in 2020 of Apple Silicon and macOS Big Sur, I thought at that moment, I was like, well, the idea that they're going to bring macOS to the iPad is at this point dead. They're never going to bring macOS to the iPad. They never will, mark my words, because at this point it's irrelevant. Because the entire point of this strategy is that the operating systems themselves are kind of irrelevant. Technically, yes, you do need to have macOS and iPadOS and iOS, and these are technically there are different operating systems. But Apple's position is that that's for them to worry about, and that from both the developer and the consumer perspective, this is effectively one operating system. Apple is the operating system, and it shouldn't really matter to you what device you choose to buy within Apple's ecosystem. You're still going to get a similar operating system experience. You're going to get access to the same apps. Now, they aren't fully there yet, obviously, because there is a lot of still legacy stuff to deal with. Those Intel Macs do still exist, and they have gotten one last update. But we are getting close enough to the point there where I feel confident more or less calling it that Apple has achieved this goal of creating an Apple as operating system. And at this point, the services also are coming into this, because Apple is focusing more heavily on services. They become noticeably better at creating apps as well. I feel some of the updates to apps like, for example, Notes and Messages are getting more and more aggressive and becoming more and more competitive with third-party alternatives. And I think that is very much part of Apple's plan. They want to have you using their software on their devices as much as possible. And that is going to require that they step up their game on software for some of these apps, where traditionally, 10, 15 years ago, they would have been okay offering a much more basic experience and just relying and letting the third-party developers, put their own spin on it. And yeah, this is extremely important for a few reasons. For users, I think it's going to be, users are going to adore, having this simplicity of running things between devices and a more similar UI and being able to buy once and experience things on different devices. That is all going to be excellent for consumers. And it's going, Apple devices are already considered very popular and very premium, and it's just going to reinforce that. And importantly, again, no one, and I mean no one, is remotely in a position to respond to this. No one's even trying. Google and Microsoft, they're not trying to respond to this. Microsoft is more interested in being an enterprise-focused company in a lot of ways, and I think Google is going that route too. I also think this is very relevant to the future of Vision OS. I don't think Apple is going to give up on Vision OS. I think that obviously it's not very popular at this point because it's very hard to get into it. It's just too expensive to buy the Vision Pro. So obviously that's not going to be a mainstream device. However, I think that Apple will continue to work on Vision OS. They will probably toy with lighter weight headsets, less expensive headsets, or maybe ones that are more of an augmented reality experience in a glasses-like form factor, and that is going to be sort of their next area of expansion. They want to reach out more and more into your life as much as possible, and they're looking for ways to do that. I also think that in regards to artificial intelligence, this Apple's operating system approach automatically gives them a particular edge, which is being totally underappreciated. And to think about that, I think let's consider the recent announcement from OpenAI that they are working on a device with Johnny Ive, and that they're going to have some kind of AI-powered device potentially out next year, although I do believe that's probably going to be a little bit of an aggressive time frame. In any case, you have to ask, what is that device going to be and how's it going to work? OpenAI has, obviously, the AI, but that doesn't mean that people are immediately going to buy any device that they put out, because, of course, they rely on their consumer electronics to do all sorts of things that ChatGPT can't do. The rumor is that OpenAI is going to have some sort of screenless device. That was sort of the leak. There was a leak after the announcement of the acquiring of Johnny Ive's company that would be the direction that they're going. If that's true, it seems very questionable, because, of course, there's all sorts of things that you're not going to be able to accomplish on a device that doesn't have a screen. I think, maybe they are, I would say, somewhat naively going for the Her sort of device, the always persistent, incredibly connected and emotionally intelligent assistant. But whatever strategy they take there, there's an entire vast constellation of other use cases that they're going to have to tackle if they really want to become a major player in consumer electronics. But Apple already has that locked down. They already have the operating systems, they already have the devices across a wide range of things in a person's home, from things they put on their head to things they have in their hand to things they put on their lap or their desk. So just to wrap things up, I do think it is incredibly important what was announced at WWDC 2025. I would go so far to say that if this is successful, provided there's not any big bugs or showstoppers with this rollout later this year, when we reflect on Tim Cook's legacy 10 years from now, let's say, this is actually going to be that thing that is most important. Apple has transitioned from a company that made a variety of very nice devices that worked well on their own into a company that, as I said, is more or less an operating system as a whole, and where various devices buy you into that operating system, which is Apple. There's really no one that is in any position to respond to this right now. And it's kind of crazy. I think that Apple almost wins by default because they don't really have a competitor in this regard. Microsoft and Google, they are not trying to do what Apple's doing. And I don't think they really care even that much about what consumers do or want to do with their devices, because it's not where they make their money. But for Apple, that is where they make their money. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Apple's latest operating system moves. What do you think? Am I totally crazy here? Or do you agree that this is something that Apple has been working on for a decade and it's really finally coming to fruition? Leave a comment, let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.